Welcome to Keepin' It Real, where we feature entrepreneurs and enterprise leaders who share their great ideas in our guest blog found on shareyourstories.online. Our guest is Lisa Bragg, a former TV reporter and news anchor who is the founder of MediaFace, a company that helps you attract and retain the right clients. We're going to discuss how content marketing has changed with a few tips on what drives long-lasting business results. And Lisa joins us from Toronto, Ontario. Welcome.
Hi, nice to see you again. It feels like forever since and we've actually met and worked together in person at one point in our lives. So it's great to reconnect. So
it is indeed. It is indeed. You know, I did receive some questions from some folks. And so I'm going to start by asking, the most question that was asked was, how does a TV reporter and news anchor become an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
So maybe you can help our audience figure that out.
Thank you. What a great question. Yeah, you know what? I was working in news for so long, and I'm going to take you way back in time before things like this were so easy. Because back in 2007, so I had already had quite a career already in broadcasting. But in 2007, if you can remember back, Justin Bieber was just starting to come out on YouTube, and there were very few. This was back in like almost Charlie Bit My Finger era. If you don't know that, Google it, look it up, because it's the very beginning of all of this that, you know, Trisha's great show is on, and all the videos we watched. 2007, and I'm like, I don't think I want to do news. The climate was changing quickly. You see some of that now in the world about what people think of news, how the challenge of the burnout from reporters, the whole gamut. So it was a changing time, and I thought, looking at all the different tools that YouTube was there and other tools were starting up, I can do this directly for clients and help them get their messages out. So, and while news is great and has a purpose in the world, not all stories are served by news. And so there's only so much time. So, and as we see now, YouTube is full. We could never even consume all the content on there. So tools were coming down in price. And I thought, I'm going to go for it. So I'm going to start my own company called MediaFace. And so left news and had it start up and running, and didn't know if anyone was going to hire me at all, because people didn't understand the world yet of content. There wasn't even a word for content. So people were used to putting it on DVDs still, and production costs were, you know, astronomical. So only the, you know, most highest level companies would do a video. And so then, or even a podcast. We were early to the game of doing podcasting because I was trained in radio documentaries. So decided to start it, put out my shingle, and started by myself, solopreneur, and then had a team of 19 people at one time, and grew it to one of Canada's fastest media and marketing companies in 2017 and 2018. So we had that honor. So, wow. And now I'm pivoting again. So I think it's the good thing about broadcasting skills is that it allows you to have this huge toolbox of skills to take and to do anything in this, especially in this new era that we're in now with communication and helping people to tell their stories and get out there. So that was that pivot. So yeah, thanks.
That's really very cool. So, you know, one of the things that I know that you do very well as a company is help people find the messaging for the content, because, you know, we all know that, and I think the recent statistic that I read was like this type of thing, like video, is just going to be off the charts for the next 10 years. You know, print is not what it used to be. And, you know, putting words on a page is not going to really attract the audience. So this face-to-face kind of communication, albeit one way, is going to be the be all and the end all in marketing. So how do you help somebody create that magical content that connects with the client?
You know what, Trish, this is the fun part, right? This is and Oprah I think Oprah even talks about it. We still go back to Oprah. You know, it's, people don't see the 95% of the slog behind the scenes. Yes. They just want to do the fun, what I call the sexy stuff, like the talking, the, you know what, our hair is done and we have a little bit of makeup on, we're talking to each other. This is the fun part. But what people don't really look at, and I call this tactics, what they don't look at is taking one step back to saying, what's our plan? And then even going further to saying, what's our strategy? And the strategy is really, what is the whole purpose of this? Because so often in my career, people said, oh, we need a video, or some new guru ninja has said we need to be on TikTok or some other platform. Let's get on that today. But they don't have a strategy for
Right.
what the intention of the message is, or whatever it is that we need to do. Why do we need to communicate? Do you even need a video? Do you even need to do a live? Do you need an animation? Do you need TikTok? Like, what do you need? You don't need to worry about the need of the tactic until you've really thought about what is the need of the audience and the message that they need to hear and you need to send. What do they really need from you? And so when you really think about what your audience needs, that's where you can give them, that's the whole purpose of it, is what do they need, and not just I need to do a video. What does the audience need to hear from me? So taking that 1,000-foot view and looking out and saying, where do I want to go? And one thing I'll say too, it's in all the things that I'm doing, it's always, what's the future? What is my future, not my past? So we're always
Right.
market to where you want to go and not where you've been.
That's really good advice because, one of the things I think that we forget is that this medium is forever,
Hmm.
right? Like until we decide that, okay, we don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to, shut down the channel, or I'm going to close my business, or I'm selling my business, or whatever it is that you're doing. I don't want to be on social anymore. The content still lives on, even if at some point in time you take it down from all of those social platforms. So, one of
Yeah.
the things that we forget is that you have to really be very conscious of the things that you say and do, because to your point about the future, your future business or your future personal life is going to be viewed by anyone and everyone who's on social.
Oh, and I think politicians see this all the time where they say something that is hugely regrettable when they were younger. And so that's where you do have to be aware. But I think that's where more and more people are putting out your values. It's about your
Right.
values, and we align by values. And so certain people put out their values, and that's where they are in that point of time. Often, sometimes it burns them, but you have your values and that's who you are. And so when you put out your values in 2010, hopefully it's the same core values as when you're in 2020, 2025, 2030, that you are still that same authentic person. It's often when we hide and we don't know our core values, that's where you think you run into trouble, or you pivot to something entirely different. And nowadays we're leaving breadcrumbs all the way along of what our true values are and how we want to show up in the world. So, I absolutely, so I have a new thing that I'm working on called bragging rights, and it's really helping people to be seen and be heard. My last name is Bragg. And what I
Exactly.
found through all of my journeys, so as a broadcaster and then as an entrepreneur for 15 years, that so many of us, especially women, wait to be picked. So we've been trained to put our head down, do good work, and eventually someone will notice you. Was that the prescription you were given as a to be
Oh, for
successful?
sure. Oh, for
And so
sure.
so many of us. So I've done cross cultural studies on this too with people across, pretty global so far, 300 people, that what the results are, and that so many of us are trained to play small. So overall, we need to think about, it comes down to, part of it comes down to our values, who we are, and who we're going to be. Um, I think I lost my train of thought on all of that because I just want to give you so much information on it. But I think it comes down to, knowing where you want to go and how you want to play.
And I love your pivot because you started off in an area of your career where the visual medium was just starting out and you were front and center in that. And then you went to content marketing where you've helped everybody else get front and center and be very visual. And now you're pivoting to something that's really cool because you'll have to just give us a little bit more insight into the issue and the connection. I love the connection between your last name and bragging rights because, to your point, a lot of women have a great deal of difficulty creating content that puts us out there. You mentioned at the beginning, your hair and makeup looks great. Well, what happens if I woke up this morning and I was having a bad hair day? And here I have this live podcast on Friday morning, and I have to say, well, you got to make this work because you've made a commitment to not only to your guests but to your target market to watch the show. So that becomes really difficult for women because we've got so many competing, priorities. So tell me a little bit about bragging, because I've seen some of your social media posts on LinkedIn. And I love the one where you were sitting on an airplane with your daughter going somewhere and you were overhearing a conversation with two friends. So tell us, why bragging? What is it about that topic that's piqued your interest?
Oh, so much to unpack there, Trish. Thank you for all of that. So, the story about the two women on the plane, they didn't know each other. They were strangers. And so we had a
Wow.
4-hour journey, and they started talking about, they had cottages in a very affluent area in Canada. And then they were going to a very affluent area in the US. And then they were talking about all the toys and the restaurants and all these things. And it was like, well, I have this and I have this too, and I have this and I have this too. And it was like really listening to it to say, which lens, what am I hearing? And where is it that it's bragging or not? And so bragging, my definition of bragging is talking about yourself, your successes, talking about your successes. And so when they had all these things, like they're talking about their successes that they're able to afford. And one of them, all these luxury goods. And one of them had sold a practice, and her husband had sold his business for like a huge sum. And so they're telling, these total strangers were telling each other these stories, and never once did it feel like one-upmanship or that they were putting each other down. They were people, peers, sharing information that also then elevated their knowledge too, because then they had new restaurants to go to, new people connected. They were connecting each other and adding to the fabric and layers of our lives. And some of the things I was like, they were a little bit out of my own personal affluence area. And I was wondering to myself, wow, what is that? And so often when we hear people talk about their successes, it's within ourselves that it goes against our own values or our own jealousies or our own
Good point.
insecurities. And so bragging is in the ear of the beholder, but ear of the beholder. It's the person who's listening in and eavesdropping or paying attention to it. That's when it's the insecurities. And so we get so concerned as business leaders, as women business leaders, especially women, but business leaders, about offending the other person. And yes, I do always want to be as sensitive to other people, but I also need to get my point across. And if they have an issue with it, how am I supposed to reach into their brain and know that they have an issue with it? Unfortunately, mind reader skill has not been developed enough yet for us to really see that. And so it's really, if you are having insecurity thoughts or thinking, wow, someone, is, and there's a difference between self-aggrandizing and bragging. But if you hear
Right.
somebody talking about their successes in a positive way and you have a reaction to it, you need to check in with yourself. If they're self-aggrandizing, which is the big word, which we lump all the bragging, negative parts of bragging in,
Right.
that's that word, self-aggrandizing. It's just such a mouthful that we put all of it under bragging. So the second part of your question was, why did I come to it? So my last name is Bragg. That's my maiden name. And so I was about 12 or 13 years old where I started realizing people have like an issue with this last name. And, when your last name is a verb, people do pick up on it. So if you have, a tiny bit of bullying, maybe more than I think, but, or want to admit, but, people would listen to the last name and, oh, who do you think you are? You bragging a lot? And so I had this mantle on me. And then even in university, the joke would be, a German class, or your last name, Bragg. And so it carried with me. And then in TV. And so a few times I thought, well, should I change this last name? It's a little bit of a burden. And then, but then I had friends who loved it because it's supposed to celebrate success. And that's where the origin of the word brag is about being proud. It is proud of your successes, but it's talking about your success, because we need to share these stories of success so humankind can be ever more successful. And so being in broadcasting, I would go up to people and say, hey, Trish, you're an expert. I would love to interview you. Do you mind if, let's tell, and then not you, because you're so willing, but the person would say, oh, no, not me. Go down the hall to John. He's
Right.
done this before. He's the expert. And so that would frustrate me. So I'd often give impromptu media training, and then I'd see the people go off and do more media, and I'd be able to just see their success. And then as an entrepreneur, I would see over and over again and hear stories from my peers about how they wouldn't get deals. And I was at something with the an ambassador, Canadian ambassador to France, and she was saying Canadian women are losing deals because they're not willing to talk about their successes and talk about themselves. And so that all those things combined, and then I would be talking to people who I'd be doing business with, and they'd say, "Can you help me with my brand? Can you help me with me?" And I'm like, "There's something to this." And so that's how I got into developing the medium and the message of bragging rights, and it'll come out in the form of a book and in all my social posts. So I hope you follow me. I'm mostly on LinkedIn, at that, and everywhere else at that Lisa Bragg or Lisa Bragg.
That's really, I really love the pivot because, the, not only is it a wonderful play on your name, but I've been an entrepreneur since 1993. And I have to tell you, one of the things as a female entrepreneur that's always been top of mind is be careful what you say. Don't share your success. Be cautious of what you share in a group of people because, and it's something that has sort of followed me throughout my entire career. And I'm sure a lot of my peers who say, well, we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to say, that we landed this deal, or we don't want to talk about the fact that we now have over 100 podcasts in this show, or we've got 300 people in our Share Your Story series, which is awesome. But because we're so afraid that somebody's going to go, hey, what's she doing? So it's really wonderful, I think, that you're putting the lens on the positivity of sharing inspirational stories that are intended to be just that, inspirational, because we all share and learn from one another. So if we don't share these things, how are we supposed to learn?
And you have to see it to be it. And so if you're not doing it for yourself, do it for the next generation, or do it for your peers who need that work and who need to see you role modeling that you have, 100 podcasts done and you have all these people part of your community and that things are thriving. We're so quick to tell the doom and gloom stories, but we're not seeing the success stories. And so I want to hear, and I challenge you to put, to send me a post on social media, tag me and hashtag bragging rights and let me know your success stories. I want you to brag. I need you to brag. I want bragging to be out there and for us to normalize talking and bragging about our successes. Like, let's talk about our successes. And we're so quick to put ourselves down. I don't know if a lot of your audience is Canadian, but as Canadians, we're like the poster children for this, is self-deprecating, which is not a good place to be, especially in this global world. And that culture comes into play with this and societal expectations because we have to be likable. So that all comes into play. But there's ways around it that we can all thrive in this. I think one of the good things that you're doing, Trish, and so many people that follow you, is that you really are about amplifying others. And that's the first step. If you are so shy in, tooting your own horn or talking about yourself, amplify others over and over again, because that adds to your own credibility, expertise. And the more you shine the spotlight on others, the light gets brighter onto yourself. So start with that as a place to go. But, we are criticized for speaking our mind and saying things, but it's really the only thing we can do to change the world is by putting our words out there and banding together and saying that, Trish is awesome and that the next person's awesome, and owning that awesomeness and not diminishing it by, oh, I'm humble bragging or saying it's like, or not telling anyone at all that you have an accolade or a media experience, media opportunity, or whatever it is that you think needs to be celebrated. It can be small and it can be large. It can be whatever it is that you think
whatever your comfort level is, right?
It's a range, and we go from a range depending on where we are in the world at that time. So it's all a range. Feel where you are at that time.
I'm going to take you up on your challenge to post something about successes in the next week, and I will hashtag you. And what I'm going to reciprocate with a challenge, and I'm going to say, when your book is published, I would love to have you back on Keeping It Real, and we'll talk about the things that you're going to do to amplify your own success so that you can share your story with a wider audience, and we'll help you do that through the Keeping It Real platform. So
I appreciate that. And I want to tell you, it's always a process. We always want to go back. When you're culturally and societally told to hide, it's a process. So every day it's like, I do have to get up there and brush my hair and put myself out there and learn to do this over and over again. So if you feel ever like you need to fade, just contact me, let me know, because I want you to shine as bright as possible. But know that some days you fade and hide, and some days you come back on strong as a as a light bulb. So I appreciate you championing my book. So bragging rights
Thank you.
and some witty subtitle to come. So thank
Yes,
you.
exactly, exactly. So I really want to thank you, Lisa. You've provided us with a lot of really great information, not only about content marketing, but about brand imaging, our own personal brand image, which I think is really important. So thank you so much for spending some time with us and sharing that expertise.
I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
And the other thing that I want to do is you are one of the first 100 features that we had on the Share Your Stories platform. So thank you so much for taking the leap of faith with me way back when I was reaching out to those folks and say, I want to do this. Would you like to join? So thank you so much for sharing your story and giving us a really great update as to where you are now in your business and your career.
I know our time is out with Trish, but that's a perfect tip right there, is go early. Especially if you're not confident in something and someone's trying something new, go early, put your hand up first, because
Yeah,
the expectations are lower. So go early.
exactly.
Thank you.
Now, before we go, I always ask folks to share their 3 words of advice. And your 3 words of advice are intent, organize, and action. And I know that you shared those a few years ago. So are they as relevant today as they were when you first shared your post?
You know, it's so funny because you reminded me of them, and they totally are. And I think it's because we need to have our intention. We need to know where we're going instead of just, again, doing whatever seems like the right thing to do that day. Have an intention, know where you want to go, and know that you are marketing to the future. So have your intention. Be organized. Being organized is never a great thing, but being organized to move forward is a good one. But really, it's about taking action. We have to know
For sure.
intent and action, and organize just helps make it so much easier along the way. But the action part, we can talk a good game, we can journal a good game, but unless we actually take the action and just one step every day, that's action. It doesn't have to be I'm totally confident and ready to go. It is one step of courage every day that's taking action, and then all of a sudden you look back and you say, like, wow, look how far I've come. So action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's really great. Thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Thanks for having me. Thank you. Nice to see everyone.
To you, our viewing and listening audience, I'd like to thank you for joining us in this edition of Keeping It Real, where we introduced you to the person behind the logo. I'm Trish Tonai, founder and host for the series. And if you're interested in sharing your business story, visit our website, shareyourstories.online. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to meeting you next time when we share another great idea.